Good evening. Welcome to the Community Consolidated School District 46 School Board meeting. We're here at Frederick School. It is July 19th, 2023, and welcome all. Can I get a call to order and a roll call, please?
Yes. Mack, absent. Braden?
Here.
Nash, absent. Albert?
Here.
LaCroix, absent. Miller?
Here.
Weedman, absent.
Great. To be clear, we do not have a quorum yet until one more board member joins us. So although we're going to move forward with the meeting, we won't be taking any votes on action items until we get a quorum. But we can proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, including the personnel report that we received earlier today? We are also tabling one agenda item to the next meeting, and that is the presentation of the update on our strategic plan. We want to make sure that we have many more board members in attendance for that very important topic. So we're going to push that to our next meeting. Otherwise, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
That works.
Miller?
Aye.
Albert?
Aye.
Braden?
Aye. Great. Okay, do we have any public comments? No. Okay. We are going to begin with a presentation on sustainable materials for construction by Shannon Bassey. Welcome.
Turn this guy on. How's that? All right. So first off, I want to say thank you. Normally people say that at the end, but I want to say thank you for allowing me the time to speak. And thanks to the board, everyone present, all of those involved in the processes that make our schools so special and successful. I imagine the workload is tremendous sometimes. First of all, I just want to give you a little background on myself, if that's okay. My name is Shannon Bassey. I come to you as a parent of 2 District 46 school children. One will be in 3rd grade at Woodview this fall. He's actually sitting right here. And I just wanted to do that to embarrass him. Did it work? No, he's smiling. And then my daughter is going to be in 8th grade, oh my gosh, this fall at GMS. I'm also a staff member at the College of Lake County, where I support equity programs in access and success in higher ed. I'm a student club advisor for the Sustainability Club on campus and a voting member of the Sustainability Council there, which is made up of staff, faculty, and students. I recently, you know what, I shouldn't say recently, it's been 3.5 years, but it was right before COVID, finished a master's in sustainable management with the University of Wisconsin, so I have that in my education toolkit. I spend time on initiatives both at CLC and in the community trying to promote awareness and action around sustainability concepts. So it's really broad, but you know, to give you an idea. Hi, Miss Nash. Let's see. Yeah, so particularly around sustainability concepts, mainly those which reduce human contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll say this again, but I really think that that's one of the most pressing problems currently. So also quickly, some examples would include bringing participation in and securing funding for our part in the Grays Lake Bike Share program, if you guys know about that. We have a few locations for the campus. For CLC, we just extended to Waukegan campus. I was excited about that. We started composting. I was a big part in starting composting collection and pickup in our cafe, both in the front and the back of the house. I initiate and help organize the pumpkin launch and composting event on our campus each fall, which has grown. You're probably aware that a lot of villages now are participating in that. I was on the task force that started our Living Lab Trail, which is an interactive walking and biking path, which incorporates signage, really great signage that explains what we're doing and what we can do on campus, in our communities, and all over the world to change the way we impact the planet. I initiated and was on a small team of folks who, through much bureaucracy, was able to convert a 4-walled courtyard space into the Japanese garden-inspired place for all to experience on campus. It's at the Grayslake campus. It incorporates native plants, pollinators, and bird strike protection, and has been certified by Open Lands and Conservation. I have been and continue to be involved in numerous other projects, either in leading or in an awareness capacity, like our no vehicle and truck idling campaign on campus, so turn off your engines, reducing the need for mowing lawns. That equipment spews carbon into the atmosphere like a lot of people don't understand. The incorporation of renewable energy sources, changing eating habits, eliminating toxic cleaners have all been part of my and our work there. So all this to say, I have a great deal of passion for the topic as well as a breadth of knowledge. So I have a few slides here. Hopefully I don't bore you to tears. I know PowerPoints aren't that fun, but they're gonna help guide me through this and hopefully help bring the concepts home for you. I've also focused it on the construction that you guys want to do, or that we want to do as a district, right? So a lot of the sustainability concepts are not necessarily woven in. I wanted to focus on what you guys were doing or trying to make decisions on with the school projects. So, oh, I have control, I forgot. I have in my notes, next slide please, but I'll do this. Okay, purpose. Okay, why am I here? When I heard about the D46 renovation and upgrades for some of our buildings, our school buildings, I was really curious what would be done to consider both the environmental impacts and if folks were aware of potential opportunities for more responsible resource use, how to keep from utilizing common construction materials that release toxins into the air people breathe inside of buildings, as well as their contributions to toxins in our tributaries and bodies of water that collect through rainwater runoff from things like tar and asphalt. It's stuff that a lot of people just kind of assume is working properly and not harming the environment. And you have a bunch of people thinking, well, the other person knows. Those people obviously are doing the right thing, right? Well, those people are thinking that we're doing the right thing. So trying to communicate this information. I also thought, wow, what a cool way to discuss things we can do to decarbonize our practices in construction, which simply means reducing the amount of CO2. And typically when we say decarbonization, I know the word carbon is in there, we're talking also about methane and NOx, other greenhouse gases that are being released into the atmosphere. So that's decarbonization. Next slide, please, Shannon. Okay, so the problem, really quickly, I just want to give, and I apologize if y'all know these concepts and it's like redundant, but I want to give a little context. I'm sure you know a lot or a little about the following, but having some background on the climate crisis is helpful. This image just shows the UN SDGs, or United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them. They're extensive. There's no way I could have unpacked that for you, and you wouldn't have wanted me to unpack any of that. But they were developed to help focus and guide the work necessary for a sustainable world. Sustainability, FYI, the definition given to us by the United Nations is meeting today's needs without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. So we're worried about the future. We have to take care of ourselves too. So I would argue that number 13 of the UN SDGs is the most pressing. It is in my mind. I write down up there, without a stable climate, ever more violent and extreme weather events make taking the other SDGs nearly impossible. Tackling, I don't have my glasses, nearly impossible because society will be spending available resources and energy on rescue and recovery. So if we don't stop increasing temperatures, we'll be devoted to addressing outcomes to a steady progression of more severe weather events every year. So think flooding, think heat waves, think fires, droughts, etc. All the stuff that you hear about in the news. Instead of spending our time and energy empowering folks with things like quality education, healthy food, clean water, climate change is being driven by greenhouse gas emissions. I'm sure you hear all about that too, if you're still paying attention, which many of us have shut off because it's kind of a dire sounding thing, and we're like, what do we do? So greenhouse gas emissions, they're predominantly made up of carbon dioxide and methane. There's a small section of other. They're the gases that are warming the planet. You can see my little picture there, which I did not create, but they include those gases that I just mentioned. 76% of them are CO2, excuse me, so the largest portion. And we know from climate researchers that the built environment makes up about 40% of global carbon emissions. 40%. It's really big. These school construction projects obviously don't make up 40% of the carbon emissions, but they're part of that sector, right? Construction. So here is a little pie chart, which is pretty boring as well, but I just want to give you a visual on how the construction projects would contribute specifically, like what our actions or what the construction actions would be contributing to. So how are we making construction materials that are being used? And I'm sorry, I wanted to get specific to the renovation projects. When we're talking about modifying the buildings, you have to look at what you're using, how you're transporting them. So if you have concrete, bricks, whatever other materials being made maybe on another continent, they're being shipped over here, that's a huge amount of carbon that's being released into the air, right? So that's why they say think local. Making and using energy, so lighting, heating, cooling, operating heavy machinery, those all probably sound very familiar to you as well. There's a section of carbon dioxide release that comes from deforestation. So that sounds dramatic, but if you're removing trees on the school properties to build stuff, that's part of deforestation. If you're using pesticides and herbicides, you're degrading the soil. That all leads to things that are not sustainable. Let's see, as a side note, the top greenhouse gas emitters are in order. Just the top 6 are China, US, Europe, India, Russia, and Japan. And you'll see at the bottom, nice and bold, the US is number 1 per capita. So I argue we have a really big stake in the game to make changes. Oops. My apologies, I skipped one. Okay, so here are many of the principles for a sustainable built environment. We have circular economies or cradle to cradle, if you've heard of those. So an example of a cradle to cradle product would be something that is made from raw materials. It goes through its life cycle, it's disposed of, and then it is recycled, made into new materials for use without waste. We're trying to focus on that. Reuse, recycle, repurpose, that's what all those words mean. We want to use things that are designed for longevity, that they have flexibility, adaptability, all those things listed there. We need to consider future climate risks. So that's what resiliency is. We need things to be strong. They need to withstand time. They need to last a long time so that our investment is not just for 10 years or 20 years, but maybe 50 or 100 to make them stronger. We need to use low carbon, low impact, non-toxic materials. We need to use things that recover and recovers resources, powered by renewable energy, sustainable water consumption is important, and it also needs to enhance well-being, right? So green spaces, biodiversity. So how can the district help? Consider the manufacturing of materials used in the process of this construction project or these construction projects. Does the process create and emit greenhouse gases? Does it include toxic or harmful components? I already mentioned that. Are they reused materials, recycled? Bricks from taking down walls, concrete that's broken up, you can recycle that. We have companies, there are companies out there that are doing these things. Are we eliminating things we don't need to make? Like, is it absolutely necessary that we're building these spaces, these rooms? If it is, okay. If not, we should eliminate it. Transportation of materials, we talked about that. I'm sorry, I talked about that. Are they made locally? Are they traveling a short distance? That's really important. Energy consumption in the schools. So do we have the facilities running on renewable energy? Do the lighting fixtures accommodate LED and alternative renewable sources as much as possible? Can we incorporate things like modifications that deflect heat from the sun in the warmer months? White roofs are a thing. I don't know if you've heard about that. So if roofing is something that is on the list, there are different ways to deflect heat. And that might sound trivial, but it actually can save a ton in energy costs just from deflecting light away from the building. And if you do that in mass, think about that, scaled up, how much you can save. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So I thought about discussing geothermal energy, and I don't know if that's been discussed. It is incredibly useful for saving energy. It's also an incredibly expensive undertaking. So I don't know if that's something that would be in the funds made available for these projects, but if not, there are also really efficient chillers and boilers that could be utilized for heating and cooling. Because those systems, HVAC, takes up a ton of energy, which you also probably know. We should also include modifications that reduce runoff, heat islands, methane creation, habitat destruction, etc. Again, seriously need to consider resiliency to make sure that these buildings can stand up to increasing strength, increasing strength of extreme weather events, so our investments aren't destroyed in extreme weather. We should make sure that we're devoting spaces for more outdoor use, especially in this digital age. We need our kids to understand the importance of nature, how it makes us healthier and happier, and how to grow things like food. Go figure. Okay, so on this and the next slide, I've just listed a few things that I think are kind of low-hanging fruit for these projects. Take it or leave it. Let's see, these are a little simpler and potentially not as costly as some of the other modifications that could be done. I am, however, obviously not an architect nor a construction or materials expert, so additional research would of course need to be done. Perhaps the company that we've hired knows the answers to many of these things already, the architects who are working on this, but I will zip through these because they're listed up here, but only build, purchase what's absolutely necessary, reuse, then recycle. Don't make waste. Let's not take stuff to the landfill. Local manufacturing, white roofing, high recycled content materials. I didn't say dash concrete because it is typically highly recycled or recycled, but we have access to high recycled content concrete and things like that. Again, lighting, heating, cooling, windows with high R values. That's kind of a simple thing that typically architects might include. It costs more money, but it's better at insulating. Native landscaping and outdoor spaces for multi-use. In your native landscaping too, if you include as many trees as possible, they call it kind of a green envelope. So you have this natural space that is wonderful for outdoor use, but it's also pulling carbon out of the air. In the cafe and kitchen area, composting collection modifications really need to be made. Not just outside for collection, but inside. Education needs to happen there. It needs to get outside, or it needs to be collected commercially. Water catchment for storage and dry spells. Think rainwater. Campus gardens and greenhouses for all schools. Find funding for growing food education. Don't create more non-porous surfaces, the surface areas for runoff potential. Don't use tar and asphalt. There's toxic vapors and runoff with that too. Utilizing non-toxic, no or low chemical emitting materials. So check for PFAS. I don't know if anyone has heard of PFAS. They are forever chemicals in the environment, and they are carcinogenic. Recycled material added to concrete too. I had a conversation with somebody who recently traveled to Switzerland, and they were using old wind turbine blades that could no longer be used because they start to warp. They were adding chunks of that to concrete. So it made it lighter. I don't know. I don't understand the specifics, but that's sort of like that thinking out of the box potential. Yeah, so that's what I have for the things I had for easy or low-hanging fruit, as they say, for these projects. Additional positive outcomes to sustainable choices. Oh, I apologize, I didn't pull that one up. Would include healthier environments and being in nature. That reduces waste. It increases student learning capacity. There have been so many studies that prove being in nature makes everybody able to focus longer. It makes them happier. I have increases everyone's joy. I'm not sure if your idea of joy is running on a beach with a bunch of balloons, but you get the idea. So what's holding us back? One of the things I learned really early on in my master's program was that folks think somebody else is going to fix it. I guess I kind of touched on that earlier. People also think that technology is going to fix it, or maybe it's not fixable, this climate crisis, or they simply don't understand the problem. So I'm trying to be an awareness builder, an educator, but really each of us has to do our part. That means everybody in this room. That means everybody in our community, everybody in our state, our country, everybody has to do these things. I don't know how to say that any better or any differently. So, why? Oh, okay, another one. Anthropogenic climate change is reversible, and anthropogenic is just a fancy way of saying human-made. The longer we take to change, whether by choice, like making choices that we're trying to do here, or by force, Earth's natural systems, scientists tell us that these weather events are going to get worse and worse. It's going to force us to change. If a storm knocks out your building, you're not using energy, right? So the longer we wait, the worse the outcomes are going to be, and mostly for the younger generation. So our kids and their kids and so on. Why should the district invest? Well, I guess I just said that, but it really is our responsibility to invest in ways that allow future generations to thrive. And these are schools. Our children are the future. These buildings are the institutions for their education. Nothing short of these accommodations and modifications makes sense to me. And I believe there are also policy considerations. I've got them on the slide here. They relate directly to what I've just talked about, including things like minimal environmental impacts. So that is all I have for you this evening. I want to say thank you very much for your time, for listening to me as a parent, a concerned citizen, and somebody who's just trying to do their part.
What questions do we have?
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't take questions. Anyone have any questions? Yes, my friend Excel. Take your time, buddy. Go ahead, you're good, you're good. I'm super curious what you're thinking about. So first of all, can I just tell you I got goosebumps? From your question, that's really touching. This is difficult for me to do. I'm not a natural presenter, but I'm incredibly passionate about making the world a better place, saving animals. I love nature, and I love my children, and when I found out what humans were doing, intentionally or unintentionally, to our environments, I wanted to learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and then just wanted to make a difference. So one of the things they say is the biggest problem for making change is education. And since I work at the local community college, which by the way I love, I can tap into so many different areas and talk to a lot of different people and all different ages, kids to folks in their 80s and 90s, and I don't know, I just love it. And I really believe that there's a goodness in all people, and that with knowledge comes power, and if I spread this knowledge, and if I help people understand, they're gonna say, oh, I can do something too, because there are so many things that need to change. We can't all do everything, but we can all do a part. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you. That was a really, that was a highlight of this for me. Thanks. Anything
That
else?
was awesome. So thank you so much, Ms. Bessie, for your presentation, and thank you for your grace with me this evening coming into the meeting. I thought it was a well-done presentation, and thank you for connecting the dots along the way. One of the things you talked about in terms of the what, and you were speaking to materials and thinking locally, that really resonates with me, because I know as a board and as a district, we're really focused on elevating equity and inclusion in our community. So, in addition to it connecting to sustainability, right? How do we think locally and also connect it to our small business owners within Grayslake, whether it be a part of a veteran-owned organization, woman-owned, minority-owned, LGBTQ, so, and then, what's not within the purview of Grayslake, right? How do we think within Lake County, to your point, so that we're mitigating transportation costs, CO2, and all that. So I thought that was good, and it directly connects to something that I, too, am passionate about. So I had two questions for you coming out of your presentation. One, you referenced heat islands, and I was curious if we have known heat islands here and where they may be located. And then two, you also spoke about white roofing, which sounds really interesting. And I was just curious as to, is there any friction between white roofing and potential building code implications?
Thank you for all of that. So first, I'd like to respond to the equity piece. Equity is, so if you're talking about sustainability, you're talking about the 3 Ps or the 3 Es. I don't know if anybody has heard of that, but if you're studying sustainability, the 3 Ps is people, planet, and profit. If it's the 3 Es, it's equity, environment, and equity, environment, and what am I missing? People, planet, profit is what I always use. Economics, thank you. So you have to make money, right? We have to make money doing what we're doing. We have to uplift communities. We have to have equity. equitable access. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. Supporting small local businesses, everything you said, yes, yes, yes. I didn't want to like try and unpack all of that, but yeah, it's if you don't have equity, you don't have sustainability. Because folks in survival mode can't behave sustainably. They don't have the energy, they don't have the resources to. So yes. The second question was about heat islands, correct? So heat islands are, it sounds much more interesting and tropical than it actually is. Heat islands are produced mainly by large asphalt or concrete parking lots, things like that. Large, non-porous, dark surfaces soak up heat, and then it sort of sticks around there, right? It absorbs the heat. It doesn't do anything in the way of deflecting the sun's rays, which is part of the greenhouse gas effect, right? The particles that are in the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases that I was discussing, pull in the sun's rays and don't let it escape as efficiently or as expediently as it should be. So those heat islands are helping, they're increasing that effect. You think, well, it's just a parking lot right here, but if you were to look at a map of the United States or the world, or even just the state, there's such an enormous amount of surface area covered by concrete and asphalt. And not only does it absorb that heat, asphalt has runoff with toxic chemicals that goes into our bodies of water. And it doesn't just impact local ecology, plants, the animals in the water, it ends up in our drinking water. So I went on a little bit about that, but that's a heat island.
Do you have a sense for what that looks like here in Grace Lake?
Changing that, a solution or the
composition
composition?
of heat islands here.
I don't. I bet I could find it. I'd be happy to find that for you. I do know that we don't want to create more if we can. If we cannot create more, that is ideal. Some places are covering parking lots with solar panels. So it offers coverage for parked vehicles. It also creates renewable energy from sun. And the last thing you asked me about was?
Just building codes as it
Oh,
relates
the
to the white
roofing.
roofing, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm also not an expert in that, in construction and building codes either. It'd be really cool if I had that in my toolkit. The white roofing is not a newer concept because it's also the deflection of heat, right? The light colors, but people have been coming up with products and ways to do that. So everything from legitimately painting roofs white, which if that's all you can do, cool, but to materials that'll last a long time that are either corrugated, rounded, and are thick. I don't think that it's similar to PVC, but I have no idea. Just like the roundness I was looking at as some of the tiles that they use reminded me of PVC, like stacked like tiles, like asphalt tiles, which we really want to get away from. And apparently have a much longer life. I don't know about the building codes. I don't know how progressive Illinois is. Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for those questions. Anyone else?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I know
Christine.
that you have a full-time job also, like many of the people in this room, and I appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate everything that you do. I know that it's a lot. I mean, it must be a lot. Thanks for having me.
I just had one more question.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you. If we were to ask you for a list of local companies that you know about, would you be able to connect us with the person or a person who would know that, or do you perhaps know that?
I would be incredibly excited to do anything that helps this project or these projects be more sustainable. And if it looks like researching responsible local companies or looking at the supply chain of materials, I would be happy to do that. Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
A question, a last question.
think that's a really good and legitimate question. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers, specific answers to that, but I do know that when you change processes, the things that you do that have been normalized, you have to think of unintended consequences, and that would be a consequence that would not be intended. We don't want to blind people with bright light, right? So you would be great on a team of thinking about, well, if we change this, what could happen? Because we need people thinking about things like that. Because no, we don't want to blind people when they're driving, right? They can't see what's going on. So those are things that we need to consider when changing things that we've been doing the same way for a long period of time. We need to think about that. So great question. Unfortunately, I don't know. Thanks. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Okay. We are going to move to board reports. So where are we starting? All right, great.
I just want to share a general save the date, August 27th, the afternoon, that's a Sunday. In case any fellow board members or other people you know are interested, this is a gathering and bike ride about gun violence prevention, and we know that's something that touches our education system and our teachers and staff, and this will be a gathering that will guide people through some of those feelings and lead us to actions that we can take. So just want to throw that out there. August 27th, and I can send you more information as I learn more. Thank you.
I have no report, so I'll pass it to Ms. Miller.
So first of all, just want to shout out a thank you to our O&M staff, just going through the financial reports, looking at all the overtime that they're putting in. So if you could pass that on, very grateful for all their work, especially as they're learning to lead them, half lead themselves probably, and then also thank Mr. Wildman for taking that on in addition to the district's finances. So thank you. Wanted to also, thinking about policy, one of our policies asks us to think about the waste diversion from our waste stream, and we, as a reminder, have agreed that we're going to develop baseline information this year and learn that in the fall of 2024. So in doing my own homework for my master's, came across an organization that I had mentioned before, but I did a little more digging, called Rebuilding Exchange. It's a 501c3. It has offices in Chicago. It has warehouses and retail shops in Chicago and in Evanston. This takes materials from renovations and diverts about 85% of demolition and deconstruction materials from landfills, which is important to us because our landfill closes I believe it's slated to close in 2025, and that means our garbage will be going to Zion afterward, which I think is incompatible with our equity goals, to dump our garbage somewhere else. So it also saves us money with from haul-away costs, so we won't have to pay to have someone drive that away, and also emissions for transportation. But I think the thing that made me smile the most was their values, which I think are pretty beautifully aligned with ours. So their values, I'll just read them. People first, which is something we always say, we're a people first business. Equity driven, sustainability minded, always learning, and joy. So I thought that might be something to look into if we are interested. So Shannon, we might take you up on the research there to see if they would take some of our materials. I have a printout if you're interested, I can share that. But I wanted to share that. Last thing is I attended a webinar on federal funding for school buildings because there is so much money out there right now. The bipartisan infrastructure law has $1.2 trillion, and the Inflation Reduction Act has $365 billion, and there are some big opportunities for schools, including clean energy tax credits, which I'm guessing you're already familiar with, but I wasn't. So, and then 179D energy efficiency tax deductions, and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund from the EPA, which is a $27 billion fund, and its priority is to decarbonize buildings. I started to dig into a tracking tool that the government has made available to us, And I spent literally about 4 or 5 hours on it, looking at grants, and barely touched the surface. And so it made me start thinking about whether it would be appropriate to have a grant writer, or whether we've had a grant writer. And so I'm just curious about the history of that. So I don't know if anyone can speak to that, but I do know that the Renew America's Schools has $500 million for renewables from the Department of Education, which again, our staff, you probably already know. And it's focused on energy efficiencies in electric vehicles. And then there's the School Indoor Air, which is an EPA $50 million competitive grants. Those two preference under-resourced communities. And I don't know if Avon or any of our Title I schools fit in that, but since Avon and Park are in Round Lake, and again, I don't know if they qualify as an under-resourced. I know Grays Lake does not. So just wondering if it makes sense, or if we have any experience with grant writers. So I'll just throw that out there, but.
Sure, I can try to speak to that. So first of all, I'd be very grateful if you'd send the names of those 2 grants to us, because that we can certainly look at to find out whether or not we would qualify. So if you'd send that our way, that would be great. Excuse me, in terms of the history of having a grant writer here, here's what I know, and potentially some of the folks who've been around longer than I have may have more information, but we did have a grant writer on staff somewhere 8 to 10 years ago, I think. What I've learned is that person only was on staff for likely less than a year, and then went on to, I think, CLC to take a job there. And the reason that individual left is because she literally could not find grants that we were eligible for, and just kept running into roadblocks. I'm told she was a very good grant writer. So it wasn't because of her, it was because of what's really available to a school district like ours and a community like ours. So that's the history. That stated, we will always run down anything that, that we can look into, and certainly something with the name school in it is helpful, that's for sure. But what we often find is that even grants that have the word school in them are perhaps for rural communities, or really tiny school districts, or school districts that are less resourced than we are, but we'll certainly be happy to look for it. So thank you. Send it our way.
And just what was interesting in this webinar was they talked about how this is unprecedented federal money for infrastructure in particular, which has just come out in the last few years, and 40% of it has to go to under-resourced schools and communities, which I love, but that means 60% doesn't. And so they talked about some ways that we can actually acquire grants through other entities too, because those entities are allowed to support school functions and school initiatives. So like I said, maybe it hasn't changed. I'm not a grant writer, but if it has, that's a lot of money. So it'd be great to do some of our projects. Thanks. So, thank you. That's it. Thank you.
All right, so I have 2 things I want to cover. The first one just being a shout out to our partners over in D127. They're having their school board meeting tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. And so I know personally I want to be more intentional about attending those meetings, recognizing that our district obviously is feeding to 127. So just to hear things that are top of mind for them, just to make sure if there's ways that we can, from a preparedness standpoint, and just making sure that we're positioning our kiddos well and supports well as we're handing them off. Want to just be aware of what's top of mind for them. And then the next thing that I wanted to touch on was with regards to our Juneteenth event. So we've been talking a lot about Juneteenth and just the excitement and energy in our community. And it's a miss on my part that I did not bring copies, because I have copies for everyone of the Lake County Journal, where Grays Lake was featured on the cover story from the Lake County Journal for our Juneteenth, our first formal Juneteenth event here in our community. I will bring those to our August meeting and be excited again when I share the copies with all of you. The coverage was absolutely amazing, and I really think that it was good content and captured the high energy of the day and the experiences and knowledge that was shared by all. And soup to nuts, I mean, we had folks, as young as in strollers to, our elders, and many coming over from the Grays Lake Senior Center right across from the library. So it was an awesome event. One of the things that we wanted to leave our community with following the Juneteenth event was a community-created map. And so our partners over at the Grays Lake Heritage Center and Museum was able to get this huge map printed off, and it had the Juneteenth flag as well as, Happy Juneteenth verbiage on it, and the Star of Texas and all of these things. And so the idea was, following the walk, everyone would be able to leave their footprint on Grays Lake following the event. And so what that entailed was, once you got to the Heritage Center and Museum at the end of the walk, everyone had an opportunity to do some coloring of this map. What happened at the end of the walk was that it was incomplete. It was beautiful yet incomplete, and we decided that rather than do that, so let me back up. So once the map was complete, the idea was that it would be encased or framed and displayed at our Grays Lake Area Public Library. However, the map was incomplete at the conclusion of the event. So rather than hang it up incomplete, we said we would leave it on display at the Grays Lake Area Public Library, so that as folks dropped in, they would have an opportunity to continue the coloring, and then we could put up a nice complete picture of our Juneteenth celebratory artwork, right? Unfortunately, the artwork that was on display at the library was defaced, and so our board president, Dr. Mack, who is not with us this evening, and the board put out a statement as it pertains to the defacing of the artwork, which unfortunately can now not be put on display. But to go on record, I just want to read the board statement and position as it pertains to the event. The Community Consolidated School District 46 Board of Education strongly condemns the defacement of the Juneteenth community flag, which was a collaborative art creation at the culmination of the inaugural Juneteenth celebration walk in Grays Lake on Monday, June 19th. The beauty of Grays Lake is rooted in its incredible diversity, rich in its ethnic, cultural, social, intellectual, and community fabric. We respect and embrace everyone, and destruction of symbols of our common humanity are inconsistent with the values that make us Grays Lake. We encourage our community to reject such actions and continue to learn about, support, and value our large and amazing human family. And that concludes my board report.
Thank you. We are going to move to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Braden. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Diaz, who is going to share a little bit about our international teachers coming in.
Yes, so the first week in August, we have 4 teachers coming from Spain and 1 teacher who's coming from Morocco, which is very exciting. And it's our first time to welcome 2 full families, so wives and infants. So we have a big group coming, and we're very excited and looking forward to it.
Thank you. So we always in the summer have that kind of information to share. We wanted to do that this year too. And then I think Ms. Gluck is going to talk about our summer programs that have concluded and how that all went.
Yeah, so good evening. We held our 3 summer programs again this summer from June 5th to June 29th. So we had Adelante, which was for identified students from the multilingual, bilingual. And then we had about 204 students that attended that program this summer, which is amazing. We had our Bridges program, which were identified students who are receiving support in either literacy or math at the Tier 2 or Tier 3 level. And we had 93 students attend that program. And then we had our extended school year program, which is also students that are identified through their IEPs, and we had 104 students attend that program. So we had very well attended programs this summer. They were all held at Park Campus, and it was a little tight there, but everything went pretty smoothly, and we've been getting great feedback from families that participated.
All right, thank you. Okay, we are going to approve the consent agenda. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Braden, Nash,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
and Miller.
Aye.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to action items. These are items that we've discussed previously and will now vote on. So first, I need a motion to approve the school treasurer's bond.
I move.
I'll second.
All right. Do we need discussion on the treasurer's bond or a reminder of what we're voting on, Mr. Wildman?
Absolutely, yes. In my position as the CSBO and the school board treasurer, I'm required to be bonded by Illinois School Code. One thing that did actually change, we actually had HB 523 was actually signed by Governor Pritzker on Friday the 9th of June, which lowered the amount from 25% to 10%. So that's the update that I have for you from the memo, because I wasn't aware of that at the time of writing the memo, but the amount is still correct.
Great. Okay.
Braden,
Aye.
sorry. Miller,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
and Albert.
Aye.
Okay, we're now approaching a second highlight of the evening. I need a motion to approve the Director of Operations and Maintenance, Roberto Ochoa.
So moved.
Second.
So I'd love to speak with you a little bit about the process that we used. The memo that you have comes from Dr. Woke, but he wasn't able to be here this evening, so I'm speaking on his behalf. So the first thing I want to share, board, is that the process that we used to interview, consider, and ultimately recommend a new Director of Operations and Maintenance was compressed. Certainly, as Mrs. Miller commented earlier, and thank you for doing so, our department has been without a director for a little while, and I completely agree that our CSBO, Mr. Wildman, has done an amazing job of leading that team during the interim. And really, the team has just been remarkable in terms of how they have pulled together and made good decisions and continued the work. So I'm just very, very grateful for that team. That stated, we didn't want to go too long without a director of O&M, so we moved very quickly. However, the process, although compressed, was as thorough as always. So the candidate that we are bringing to you this evening has been through four interviews. The first one is the video interview that all candidates who apply for a position do. It's an uncomfortable experience to speak to your computer and hope that it comes out okay. So that's the first one. Then from that grouping, we selected, I believe it was 6 candidates to come to meet with some of our cabinet members, kind of as our next level of screeners. Then 4 candidates came and met with a larger panel. So that larger panel included some central office administrators, some school administrators, and very importantly, some members of the O&M team. And from that group, it was narrowed down further to 2 finalists. So I am extremely excited to present our recommendation to hire Mr. Roberto Ochoa today. I'm going to actually hand this over to Chris Wildman, who was a part of the interview process throughout all of it, and he's going to talk a little bit about why we are especially excited about this candidate.
Roberto is joining us, having been employed with the Waukegan Public School System, where he's been there since 2016. Roberto started there as a custodian, then he became a custodial supervisor in 2018, and in 2021 he became their assistant director of operations. He's bilingual in Spanish and English, and he comes to us with his CPMM, which is his Certified Professional Maintenance Management, and his CPS, his Certified Professional Supervisor certifications. Both of these are from the Association of Facilities Engineering, so he's both experienced and highly qualified. Roberto was the standout candidate in the process from a very strong pool of candidates. I wanted to say that the feedback from the stakeholder interviews, which involved 3 members of his team, was, can we hire him now, and when can he start? We're very pleased to be bringing Roberto to you this evening. He's ready to join us tomorrow. And in fact, we actually have his computer for him and his email set up. So he is starting tomorrow.
Fantastic. Great. Let's vote.
Okay. Braden,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
Welcome.
Welcome, yay.
Yes.
There we go. And do you, are we doing cake now?
It's up to you, really. You know, it's just kind of short meeting. We can probably.
Yeah.
Hold on, we're discussing cake.
We're discussing cake timing. The big question, Mr. Ochoa, can your son last another little while, a
Maybe
couple
like
of
a
more
half an hour.
conversations, and have some cake at the end? Would that be okay? Fantastic. Okay, we look forward to celebrating with you just as soon as we get done with our agenda. So welcome. All right. Great. Okay, we're going to move to unfinished business, and we have one item under that category, and that is our Equity Action Plan update.
Okay, we got some people to. All right, good evening, everyone. You're used to seeing this team in front of you talking about our Equity Action Plan. We've done it quite a few times. As always, we truly believe that our Equity Action Plan speaks to all 3 components of our mission: empowering learners, creating equity, and cultivating community. And today we're going to be reviewing the EAP and the updates within each strand. I think we were here maybe 6-7 months ago and let you know what we were planning to do in the upcoming 7 months ago. Now we're going to talk about what we're doing in the upcoming year, a little bit of what happened this past year and what we're doing next year. And remember that an EAP is an accountability framework to identify, measure, and sustain actions to advance equity. It's a collaborative process. We developed it with district stakeholders, and it relies on systemic commitment to best serve all students. Here's the membership of the group of people in our DELT, that stands for District Equity Leadership Team. This will change a little bit. There are a few folks here who have moved into other positions, and we'll be bringing a few new people on. There are 5 strands of systemic equity, and we'll be speaking about each one of these tonight. And we're going to start with the system strand, so I will speak about that. So the system strand is exactly what it sounds like. It's about ensuring a systemic and continuous development towards advancing equity within all policies, processes, procedures, initiatives, decision-making, and fiscal responsibilities. This is the 4 people that make up the systems strand. All right, I'm going to pause here just to talk about how these slides are aligned, because we're not, how we put them together, because we're not going to read through every one of our slides that has this measure and alignment statement on it. So I just want to talk about it for a moment in this one. The first objective in the systems strand is to establish and communicate our beliefs around the topic of equity through common, consistent messaging shared with all stakeholders. On the left side, it talks about how we're going to measure that. We're going to measure that by collecting data regarding methods and frequency of messaging. We always have to be able to measure our objectives. On the right side is the alignment section. The alignment shows, hey, this is not just a thing we're going to do that has nothing to do with anything else we do in the school district. It shows how this area aligns with everything else in the school district. So on that side, you're typically going to see policy. You're going to see parts of our, well, you'll see our mission, you'll see parts of our vision. So what's in bold is how that objective is aligned to the vision. So board, I'll invite you at another time just to carefully go through those alignments, and you'll see that everything we're doing is connected to other agreements we've made in our district. All right, so back to that objective. Here's the update. We did create definitions related to equity. We posted them on our website, and that's ongoing. Soon after we posted them, we realized, hey, here's another definition we need to include, and we posted that. So we'll continue to be doing that. We have posters, and I think we talked about those here at the board before, posters that we're going to be creating for considering matters of equity when making decisions. And I have a spot picked out right there for the one in the boardroom, right? We've got our mission poster there. We'll have our equity poster there, and we'll have that ready sometime this summer. So we're excited about that. We were sitting in our, well, Mr. Wildman's office today, which is also our small conference room that we meet in for cabinet, and looked at a little space that has a piece of little piece of art that was probably chosen by a CSBO about 25 years ago. And I asked him, is he committed to it? Surprise, he's not. We're going to put a poster up there. So, you know, we'll be finding spots that are kind of decision-making spots, right, all over the district, so that we are making sure we're considering matters of equity when making decisions. Objective 2 in the systems strand, objective 1.2 is to develop strategies to recruit and retain highly qualified, diverse staff. So we're going to be measuring that by monitoring it. All right, so this, we have 2 slides here. First, I'm going to talk about what we've done, and then we'll talk about what we're doing in the upcoming year. So we have reviewed the staff diversity demographic that we've had in the last 5 years. We've also researched the diversity of individuals and teacher prep programs at local universities. I'm going to tell you that we didn't find what we were hoping for. The diversity is not nearly as grand as we'd hoped, but we needed that information, and now we have it. We reviewed and revised candidate interview questions in order to recruit a diverse staff and staff members who are committed to equity work. And we've kind of got a bank of these questions now that we're using at every level that when we're hiring people, including Mr. Ochoa. You may remember getting some questions in your interviews for Director of O&M that spoke directly to diversity in one way or another. I was talking with Dr. Woke today, and actually with Mrs. Luck about it as well, asking, hey, what are we seeing, right, when we're doing that? Because I haven't sat in on teacher interviews, certainly, and the consensus is that we are seeing a new peek into our candidates and what people's perceptions are, and it's really helping us make sure that we are hiring the right people. We conducted a survey of the multilingual department to understand staff perceptions of feelings of inclusion in CCSD 46 culture. This is something that came out of our equity audit. We wanted to explore it further. And I'll say we got mixed results. Certainly we had many members of many questions that we asked that showed people feeling very confident that they are deeply included in our culture, But there were other places where we thought, okay, well, we have some areas to work on, including just making sure that we, along with including our multilingual department in other, in district-wide discussions, that the multilingual department has more time to just talk with each other, because that was something that came out of that. And so we've got that in our plans moving forward. We are in the process of building interest in paraprofessionals to become certified staff members. And we're supporting that process through building a support group and helping paraprofessionals find teaching programs to support goals. That's been really exciting. We've had maybe 6 to 8 paras who said, yeah, I want to be a part of that, but more people have been emailing Dr. Woke and saying that they want to be involved. So that's really exciting. It's about growing your own, and we're doing that. To that end, we're continuing to build relationships with local community colleges. In the upcoming year, we will be conducting focus groups with staff about ways to attract diverse staff and take action based upon those recommendations. And we'll be using our website and social campaigns to promote our school district, including highlighting a focus on equity. And before I leave this objective, I simply want to point out really very proudly that 2 of our new administrators hired for the upcoming school year are fully Spanish bilingual, Spanish-English bilingual, and are of Hispanic descent. So this has really been a focus for us, and we are very proud to be able to state that. All right, I'm going to hand this over to, I believe, Mrs. Mrs. Woodruff, to talk about teaching and learning.
Thank you. All right, so the goal of the teaching and learning standard, or teaching and learning strand, is to focus on teaching and learning. Focus on ensuring equity within all curricular resources, assessments, programs, and instructional strategies. These are the 4 members of the teaching and learning strand. Objective 2.1 is about developing understanding around culturally responsive pedagogy and practices. And we have 2 measures that we're focusing on specifically. So in the second half of this school year, we started providing professional development around the culturally responsive pedagogy. Specifically, there was time given at staff meetings dedicated to that work. During this time, staff were provided with articles around culturally responsive practices, and then they were asked to participate in shared readings and discussion around these articles. The purpose of this was to start to develop common understanding of these practices, and then moving into the upcoming school year, we're going to begin our work on the culturally responsive teaching and leading standards. Say that 5 times fast. This work will then be a joint effort between not only the teaching and learning strand, but the professional learning strand. Also moving into the new school year, we're going to continue our work diving into student group performances on both local and state assessments, analyzing performance. Objective 2.2 is to review curriculum, resources, and district assessments for components of equity. A lot of this objective can't be done without doing objective 2.1, but as we kind of start reviewing curricular resources, as we did last year for literacy and health and this past year for science, we have been reviewing components of new resources for equity, making sure that the companies that we're partnering with are providing equitable resources and making sure diversity is at the forefront of what they are providing to our students. But future work to develop rubrics to evaluate district assessments for components of equity in our assessments will have to be done after we do our culturally responsive practices professional learning in objective 2.1. All right, I think next is Ms. Mizwicki.
So the strand that I'm going to speak about is student voice, climate, and culture. And this is the strand that really focuses on bringing students' voice to the forefront. These are our strand leaders. Our first objective is to implement a student advisory committee, and we're going to review this through student feedback and then tracking the meetings and attendance. Where we are is we're continuing this process. We're focusing on our 5-8 buildings to get this started because they already have systems in place that can be shifted towards this. So the Strand Committee developed an overview with a clear purpose, and that purpose is that this student advisory committee is going to empower the students to advocate for their needs in a proactive, collaborative, and equitable manner. Starting out this school year, we have a Google form to send out to our staff at Frederick Park and GMS to look for new staff sponsors. With staff attrition, we might need some new sponsors. We're also going to use the existing student groups in schools, which could be student council, PBIS groups, and different student advisory groups. We're going to continue to organize the leaders so that the students can have that vehicle and express and address their own needs. Our second objective is about reviewing and analyzing data of discipline referrals by multiple identities, and those identities can involve race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disability, multilingual learning. And we're going to measure this by looking at how that data is reviewed and used. So the process has begun. At this point, we have data, raw data, that our deans have pulled in the 5-8 grades from their systems, and some of the Strand members have dived into that already. The next steps are this summer. The principals are going to meet and review what we have, because our first steps are going to be to develop systems to analyze that data regularly and then find out what further questions we need to explore throughout the year, from which we can identify the action steps to address the areas. That leads me to our next strand, which is professional learning.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about professional learning, and it's exactly what it sounds like it is. It is building a continuum of professional learning and growth opportunities for our staff. So this is our current committee. I also want to note that we are incredibly lucky that Mrs. Morales, who is our new assistant principal at Park Campus, has done a lot of this work and provided a lot of professional development, professional learning in this area. And so she actually reached out to me earlier today, and she will be working with us in this strand as well. So we're extremely excited about that. So our first objective in 4.1 is just developing a shared understanding on the topics of equity, and we want to ensure that there's a shared definition and understanding for all staff. So some updates with this, as Dr. Glickman already stated, we do have definitions that are public at this time, and the professional learning strand has developed a needs assessment survey that we will be giving to staff in August. Part of the purpose of this needs assessment is for us to do exactly that. We want to know what are the needs of our staff so that we can differentiate and absolutely meet their learning needs on a continuum. So our second objective is then leads into that continuum of learning. And we're going to build a continuum based on what we find through that needs assessment. We developed a walkthrough document. This walkthrough document is non-evaluative. It is truly just for us to be able to gain some understanding of what do we see within our classrooms? What do we see within the hallways? What do we see within our shared spaces in our buildings that help us to know what do we need to learn more about and spend some more time really getting clear. And we're going to create some teams that will be made up of representatives from all of our schools, all of the different levels and different departments, and they will then go on these walkthroughs together in the fall. So we're looking forward to that. We also have a third objective, and that is then to implement the professional learning opportunities. So that will provide the staff training itself. So after the completion of the needs assessment this fall, we'll develop that continuum, and then we will start implementing the professional learning. And I am going to turn this over to Dr. Diaz.
All right, the fifth strand is about family as community as agency, and so how we can have our families feel welcome and then contribute to the climate and culture in the schools. These are our members, but I also want to thank Leslie, who has attended our last 3 meetings, so she is also a member in our strand. And our first objective is to foster a culture of equity in all district buildings. And how are we going to measure that? By a survey, climate survey, and a 5 essential survey. So an update is that we have created this survey. It is ready to go, and it will be launched kind of twice. One is at our very first BPAC event, which will be September 1st, and then right after that, again, kind of through I'll email district-wide to all of our families, and just to sort of see how can we help you feel more equitable, how can we help you feel more welcome in the classes, in the schools, in the buildings. We're looking forward to see what we can have. Our second one is to establish consistent communication expectations. And so here we are working on a template for a protocol, for a consistent format, for publishing on the website, what languages, all those different things. And so what we've done so far is we have a detailed report of translation. So we have 727 students in the EL program as of today, and we know who would like written translation, and then who would like oral, like interpretation, or who would like both, and in what languages. So we have all of that ready to go. It will be shared out with leadership before school begins, and then detailed as new students arrive. It'll just be updated. And then we also we are talking about a consistent newsletter template, and then what languages and all of those things like I had previously mentioned. And then finally, we have compiled a translation protocol and interpretation protocol. And that has already been shared out with leadership and staff at the end of last year. It will go out again this August. All right, so thank you. I'll give it back to Dr. Glickman.
Thank you. Hopefully, board, most of what we shared was familiar to you because we've already shared it, right? This is the work that we were planning to do. Now you know where we are in it. And we wonder if you have any questions for us.
I have one quick question, Dr. Glickman. So thank you for the update to the committee leads and team members that are advancing this work forward. Would it be possible to get a view into or a summary of the research that was done with regards to, I don't want to call out the wrong string. Hold on, let me go back to the presentation. When we were talking about equity and recruiting diverse talent, I'm sorry, was that 3?
One.
All right. Hold on, I got the wrong thing in mind. While I pull it up, my ask is that something that maybe Dr. Wolk can pull forward and just share out just a summary of the research and the findings?
Absolutely, I'll be happy to. So I think what you're asking about is the information Dr. Wolk got from the universities about. I will have him send something to the board. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 2. First of all, I'm really excited about the whole thing, so thank you for all of the work that you've been doing. But I focused on 2 areas and just wanted to throw this out to put it on your radar. If Objective 2.2, you talked about, Amanda, I think it was you, you talked about reviewing the curriculum. It's not a question. It's reviewing the curriculum for culturally responsive classrooms, correct? And if I understood you rightly, you are focused on the content of the materials. Is that correct?
So we want to make sure that the materials that we're selecting are culturally responsive and represent all of our students. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. We want to make sure that anything that we're using and any resource that we're partnering with has that kind of framework. But in all of our assessments, we are looking at them through an equity lens. So we are going to be developing a rubric after we do some of our professional learning around culturally responsive teaching practices to then go back and review our classroom assessments for components of culturally responsive practices and equity.
And all of that I love, and that's in the classroom.
Yes.
And when you started talking, my brain started popping because I know that we have periodically brought up our procurement policies and how we're wanting to make them more equitable. So I'm just going to throw this on your radar as potentially something to consider for that rubric, which is not instruction-based, but would carry our equity focus forward in terms of looking at the manufacture of those products. Because as you're looking at companies, one of the things that I am becoming newly familiar with is taking a look at something called the 6 T's, right, of socially responsible businesses. And one of those is traceability. So not only do we want our kids to be in culturally responsive environments, but my goal, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the entire board, I'm just speaking for me right now, but and not because I think the rest of the board doesn't share this, just because I want to be responsible about not speaking on behalf of the board without their permission. So with that, one of the things that the 6 T's can offer and could be incorporated into any rubric for a product that we purchase is, where do those raw materials come from, and what is the impact of that extraction on those kids who live there? And then also, what are the working conditions that their parents live in and that they learn in? And if we can, regardless of evaluating those, if they just publish them, that indicates a more socially responsible business. So just something to think about.
Of course.
The second thing was 4.1, the shared understanding of equity. So I had a thought here. Let me look at my notes. So one of the, again, thinking outside the classroom, because I know that there are you have the expertise and don't need necessarily our input into the classroom specifically, but in terms of thinking about our newcomers and our refugees and our, Stephanie help me, Dr. Diaz help me, asylees, is that, thank you. The environmental impact that they're leaving has an impact on cognition. And so understanding that might make us more sensitive to the products and materials that we put in front of them, so they're not reintroduced to more of those toxins. It might be an interesting way to look at the environmental impact of the supplies that we're buying. One, to protect our own students, but also to make sure that the kids there are also protected.
Yeah, thanks.
Dr. Glickman, it was 1.2. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Thank you all so much. It's such great stuff. I don't have a question, but a request that's actually more related to our new board policy, which is I just wanted to get on our radar that we committed to doing equity training as a board after each election. So we had one in April, so maybe sometime this fall or over the winter, I think would be a great time to source some good equity training, whether that's through ISB or IASB or somebody. So thank you again for all your, I love that we're moving forward in this. I guess my only other thought was, I think this is actually a competitive advantage for us in terms of staffing. And people who are feeling like maybe their district isn't making steps forward and instead backwards might be really interested in an environment where we are moving forward on it and not backwards. So just something to think about in terms of recruitment.
Thank you. That's exactly our hope. Thank you.
I apologize. I meant to ask Jess if she had questions as well before we moved on.
I had a few questions, but then they were answered during the presentation. So thank you.
Christy, can I just piggyback on something that you said?
Of course, yeah.
So I love the focus on professional development, and absolutely on board with you in terms of thinking of equity training as being a competitive advantage. And as Shannon mentioned earlier, equity and environment go hand in hand because they are two of the three pillars of sustainability. So if that professional development included any reference to climate justice, I think that both gives us a competitive advantage, also gives us a better understanding of where our students are coming from and what they've impacted, and helps us as we consider building renovations, because indoor environmental quality has multiple components that are impacted by the materials that we bring into the room. So just something else to think about.
Thank you. Okay. We are moving to new business, and that is a discussion of student representation on the Board of Education. supposed to have some sort of filler here while Dr. Glickman takes her seat.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Braden. I think it's very interesting that the board is having this conversation on the very evening that, without any prompting, one of the most impactful comments came from a young man who's looking around right now, sitting in the audience. That would be you. Yes, so I think that was perfect timing as the board talks about the importance of student voice. Christy and I had a chance to talk earlier, and I think, it's a discussion topic. It's not an action topic. I don't know if you'll ever need to vote or not, but we assumed that we wouldn't, that the board probably wouldn't come to fruition on anything this evening, since almost half of the board is missing tonight, but that maybe this could be the start of a conversation. And my understanding when we left the last meeting and kind of put this on this week's agenda was that I would do any research that I could as to what other school districts are doing, and that there were perhaps some board members who were going to be looking into it as well. I don't know if there are any board members that are here that looked into this topic.
I'm pretty sure Dr. Mack had the contacts from when he went to Triple I, and so I think he's going to be prepared to share his
Got it. And if it was from Triple I probably actually already have that information.
Okay.
So there you go.
Perfect. And I told him to watch the video.
There, okay. All right, so I did do some research, and it's interesting because although I was able to find some school districts that have programs in place, what I found more of is school districts that are interested in having programs in place. This is kind of a hot topic right now, but good for our board to be on the cutting edge of the hot topic. So, first of all, many of the school districts that are in one way or another including students at the board table are doing it with high school students. That stated, I was able to talk to some places or gather information from some elementary districts that are doing just that with 7th and or 8th graders. Typically, actually, I think they were all 8th graders. I also had, I reached out to my entire Lake County Superintendent's group, found 2 school districts that responded that are currently doing something, and I'll speak to that, but a number that said, oh, I'm interested, let me know what you find out. So, so there you go. Basically what I learned is that there are two different models that are in use. And of course there are lots of different, components of those models and ways, tweaks to them, but I'll describe the 2 different ideas. So one is really pretty simple. It's just about having typically 2, maybe 3 students who come to board meetings. The places that I talked to or read about had 1 board meeting a month. So we have 2, and I'm not sure we'd ever ask an 8th grader to give up 2 nights in a month to a board meeting, so you'd have to figure out what you wanted to do with that, but they regularly come to board meetings. There's an interview process, a selection process for being a part of it. They make a commitment to be here. There are protocols in place. There are things that they can do and they cannot do. Basically what they're doing is sitting at the table and asking questions, participating in discussion, in some cases giving some presentations about things that are happening back at the schools, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a moment. They, never can be voting members. They don't get, confidential board communications, nor do they go to closed session meetings. So that's one kind of model. The other model is more of, I'm going to call it a superintendent advisory committee or superintendent advisory council. And in that model, the superintendent goes to meetings or has meetings with students typically 8th graders, and works with those students and principals about projects, what they're working on, what they're interested in, what they want to look into. So very much like what Mrs. Mizwicki was talking about earlier, that's related to our equity work, right? So we already have that work started, and I actually met today with Mr. Mohammed and Mr. Smith about what they have in place at the schools, and to some extent or other, they have already started that at their schools. So in that model, I would be a part of some of those meetings, and then from those meetings, we would have maybe one from each school. Students come to board meetings. It would probably be a rotation rather than being just one student all year long. Those students would still have protocols. Part of their work would be actually to do a little report at the beginning of a meeting, or maybe as a part of the superintendent's report, or maybe there would be another section where they would speak about, hey, this is what we're talking about in our meetings right now, and this is what's important to us. And then they could stay for the meeting and kind of, as I described before, participate in discussion, ask questions, answer questions, those kinds of things, and still not vote. So that would be a little bit more of a rotation. So those are the things that I learned about. Again, lots of nuances in both of them, but you're thinking about either, a 2 or 3 students who are here regularly, or rotated students that's more related to like a superintendent's advisory council. And then there's probably other models out there, but that's what I was able to gather.
Thank you for providing that research. In preparing for the meeting tonight, what you just said, it makes me laugh because I'm like, oh my gosh, in my notes to myself, discussion of student representation on the BOE. If we implement a student advisory committee from the EAP, could the students selected rotate? And we could have one of them attend at least one BOE meeting a month.
Yes, they could. Yes, they could. Yeah.
I love the intersection of the work that's already been done on the equity action plan, equity audit plan, action plan, and what we were discussing or planning to discuss.
I kind of like the idea of being inclusive and like involving as many students as possible, and also then reducing the commitment for each of them. So that way people who have, students might feel it's a little more manageable for them. So I love it.
I love both. I'm just wondering if you have a knee-jerk preference.
Thanks for asking. Well, I will tell you that I have long wanted to have a student advisory council, having nothing to do with coming to board meetings at all, and prior to even having, prior to the DELT. And I've had this little hang-up, well, there was COVID in the middle of all that, but aside from that, I've had this little hang-up that was wanting to have one committee, knowing we have 8th graders in 2 places, and knowing that in no circumstance would we put something together that you could only participate in if you happen to be available after school and happen to have parents who could drive you, right? That's never what we're going to do for something like this. So I kept getting stuck there. Then recently I thought, well, we have learned how to use Google Meet. We could do something with that. So I am interested in that. I will share with you, when I spoke with Mr. Smith and Mr. Malamed, one of the things that we agreed on is that regardless of what model the board wants to pursue, I very much want to come to those building level meetings anyway. To get involved with the students and hear from them as to what they think we need. So we will be doing that regardless of what the board selects. I think that that would be a pretty simple way to do it. It's work that we want to do anyway, and it's some work that we've committed to through the DELT. I agree with you that it would be inclusive, more kids involved. I can envision that there would be some students who are all about being a part of the discussion at the school level who would never want to sit at a board meeting, and that's fine, right? So you might see the same students over and over again a little bit. I think that would be okay. So I'm excited about that option, honestly. I think it would give kids even more voice.
A great job pulling all this content forward. I don't think I have anything additional to add than what my board colleagues said already. And let's work smarter, not harder, right? We already have, to your point, the building blocks in place to get this off the ground in a very simplified manner, an inclusive manner.
All right. Well, so I will share that I was reviewing the triple I presentation that I think Dr. Mack must have gone to. And in there was a sample policy so that the board there could be an updated board policy. Now, I'm not sure the extent to which that's necessary in this model, right? If it's not having the same students over and over again, but I'll look into that. I don't know if it's a policy change, then the board would vote. If it's not, I'm not sure. So how about I do a little bit of research between now and the next board meeting, and we bring it back in some form or another? Again, we haven't been able to hear the voices of 3 of our board members on this topic, and so we can kind of review it, and then I can let you know what I've learned in terms of policy. Sound good? Okay,
Sounds great.
you. You played an important role tonight. Thank you. Cake is almost now, though, just so you know.
It's almost cake time.
It's almost cake. Right.
Our last item is topics for future agenda items. How about the continuation of the discussion of the
Yes, let's do it.
All right.
Perfect. Well, actually, I want to start by saying and reminding the board that our very next meeting is not a regular board meeting. On August 9th, there'll be a special board meeting to discuss the potential of bringing a funding proposal to the community. And Mr. Wellman and I met this week with kind of the team of people that we're working with to talk about those matters. We have Paul Hanley from Beyond Your Base will be there for that meeting. He'll actually be the person who will present and share kind of what the work has been over the last number of months in this topic. But ultimately, any recommendation will come from me, so I'll be the person giving you a recommendation. So he'll be here. We have Liz Hennessy coming as well that evening, and I'm not sure if anybody else from that team. So that's the next meeting. Any questions about that? Okay. Then our next regular board meeting is October 16th. We will start with that's what, I don't know what I said. October, November, okay. August 16th. We'll start with a policy committee meeting, 5:30 meeting. We have a new set of press policies, and as per agreements that we made, we're doing those policies as soon as possible so that we can fit in 2 policy meetings if we need them. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So we've got a policy meeting at 5:30. We're going to do the strategic goals update that we had planned for tonight. Just to clarify for the board, we were ready to go, but I think you know that because you saw the memo, but we just felt that it made sense to do it when we had more board members here, since we'll be sharing with you what the work of the district will be this year. It just made sense to have as many people here as possible. We have the approval of the fiscal year 2023 tentative budget and publish a legal notice for public hearing of the FY 2024 tentative budget. Did I get that right, Mr. Webb? Yeah. An update on summer capital projects. We'll have a new member of the team here at the board table presenting the information about the summer capital projects. We'll be approving the hazardous roads conditions eligible for transportation resolution. That's something we do yearly. And as you suggested, Mrs. Braden, more discussion on students at the board meeting. Team, anything I missed? Okay. Then September 6th, if we need a second policy committee meeting, we can have one. So we kind of hold that 5:30 open. We're planning on doing an update on tech projects. And then the only thing I can tell you at the moment about September 20th is we'll have the final budget public hearing that night. And I'm sure much more. All right, that's it.
All right. Any public comment? All right. We do not have a need for a closed session tonight, so I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Nash,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
and Braden.
Aye. All right. It's cake time.